كريس لانغان الرجل ذو معامل الذكاء 200 والذي يعد واحدا من أذكى البشر على قيد الحياة يتحدث برؤية مغايرة وعقل فذ عن الوجود الحقيقي لله تعالى وعن حقيقة الملائكة والشياطين، كاشفا أسرارا حيرت عقول البشر قرونا طويلة.
You will persist after you die.
You're telling me I'm going somewhere.
Yes.
God is outside of time and space.
God distributes over time and space, and there's some left over. Time and space is static. It's a display.
Yeah.
Imagine that you're a little homunculus inside a computer display, like the Matrix, for example, okay? God not only distributes over that, but there's a whole other domain where God exists. And that's the processing domain. That's the non-terminal domain. We're living in the display of that simulation. In addition to the display, there is also a processing aspect, okay? And God captures both of those things. He captures both the display and the processor. What is reality? Is reality just stuff out there?
No.
Reality has a mental aspect. And I'm saying that consciousness exists in every part of the universe because those are the quanta.
That's what I'm asking. Are you telling me that this table is conscious?
In that sense, yes. Generically conscious.
Are angels and demons real?
Yes.
God is real, angels are real, demons are real. Is the devil real?
Oh, yes.
We're talking about a theory of everything. The first question we have to establish, does God exist?
Yes.
Simple as
Yes.
that.
The reality has an identity, okay? The identity is that as which something exists. Matter of fact, when you say the word reality, you're naming an identity. It is, you're identifying something. That's what the CTMU says. It just comes up with the mathematical structure that you need to build a reality out of that, you see? So you come up with that identity and then you search it for its properties. You see, once you've built the preliminary framework, then you start deducing the properties of this identity, and you find out that those properties match those of God as described in most of the world's major religions. You can deny the existence of God, or are its properties such that God definitely has to exist? And the answer is, God exists. Properties of the central substance and central principle of reality, those properties are attributed to God, including, of course, things like you have the three O's, omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, but then you've also got consciousness. God has to be sentient.
We're not just defining God out of existence. Sometimes you'll hear people say God exists, but they'll give God such a weak and shallow definition that the God that they're describing has no relation to the God that we conceive of. You're saying, no, God himself is conscious and therefore personal?
Yes. You can establish a personal relationship with God. We're images of God. You know what an image is? It's basically the product of a mapping. God maps himself into each human being.
Is your claim a pantheistic claim that God is the universe or the universe is God and that's that? Or no? Or is God outside of the universe and created?
God is greater than, well, what is the universe? Simulation hypothesis?
Yes.
Okay, well, the simulation hypothesis is basically the idea that the reality we see around us, physical reality, is simulated on some sort of an automaton or a computer. God, it's more panentheistic. The idea is that you've got the physical universe that you see around you, but God is not confined to the physical universe.
Okay.
See, there's an ordinary pantheist assumes that God is somehow confined to the universe, that there is just what we see around us and God is in every piece of it. God is distributed over it.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit more complex than that, because this part of the universe that we see around us cannot exist just by itself.
Yeah.
Okay? There are certain things that it entails. And when you go into those entailments, that's how you get to God. That's how you get to the identity of reality. But to get back to the simulation hypothesis, that we're living in the display of that simulation. In addition to the display, there is also a processing aspect. And God captures both of those things. He captures both the display and the processor.
What do you mean? I hate to put it in.
Well, I mean, okay, here's the display. You realize the display contains states.
Yep.
Okay, you see things, the objects contain states. States are static.
Yep.
That's why they're called states.
Yeah.
Okay, static. How do they change? Well, they have to be processed. Something has to be processed.
Yeah.
And in the calculus, for example, those are tiny little infinitesimal intervals, okay? But they are not actually contained in the states themselves. They have a neighborhood, a little tangent space or what have you, where you can sort of draw little vectors that suggest that some kind of processing is going on. But the idea of being a state and being a process Those are two different things to the ordinary way of looking at it. It turns out that you can't properly describe reality and causation at all unless you put those things together somehow. And that's what it takes God to do. God provides the processing functionality for your state.
Now, how do I make sense of consciousness?
Well, ordinarily, quantum mechanics, you know what quantization is?
You know, I know the word.
Yeah, well, you decide what the ultimate irreducible objects are. It turns out that in order to quantize that theory that I was talking about, that theory of identity, where you've got the display and you've got the processor, and it's handling both. It turns out that in order to handle both of those things, you need a certain kind of quantum. That quantum is called an identity operator. God is the identity. So obviously these little quanta, they have to be, they're doing things, they're processing, so we can call them operators, right? They are identity operators. Okay, the identity operator has, basically it takes input from the outside world, recognizes it or accepts it using syntax, processes it, and then returns it to the world as external state.
That's what I'm asking. Are you telling me that this table is conscious?
In that sense, yes. Generically conscious. It's relying on our consciousness to do it. There's levels of quanta. These are tertiary quanta. They're all put together using physical localistic forces, right? But those are underdeterminative. They don't fully determine what happens. Why? The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, for example, it tells you that the quantum rules, they're probabilistic.
Now, you've mentioned two things that raise a new question for me, which is you mentioned this idea of simulation, just the simulation or self-simulation, and you've mentioned us doing things. So then it would seem to me we have to tackle the question, do we really do much of anything at all, in the sense, do we have free will?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it. I always thought we did.
Well, yes, we have to have free will. I was discussing with you earlier the idea of a fixed array. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, now, modern physics know, basically what you've got is you've got a bunch of quantum fields in superposition, and then those fields consist of little fluctuations, little quantum fluctuations, right? Reality is actually generative. Okay, it's not a fixed manifold. Everything is being created all the time. Not just our states. Our states are being recreated, right? When I look at you, I'm seeing Michael Knowles, okay? I'm seeing you sitting there. But that means that I'm seeing your boundary. I'm seeing what distinguishes you from the external environment, right?
Right. Well, it's sort of like a little baby, right? Has trouble recognizing the limits of things and recognizing what some individual object might be from, you know, the glass on the table. They have trouble distinguishing those
Precisely.
things. Yeah.
Okay, the baby has to learn to distinguish those boundaries. And it has to receive the right visual cues at the right age so that it can actually learn how to do that.
Yeah. So speaking of this non-terminal domain, in a really basic question, I'm not going to ask you if I'm going to go to heaven or hell, but will I go to either heaven or hell?
You will persist after you die, okay? Where you go depends on who Michael Knowles really is.
But you're telling me I'm going somewhere.
Yes.
You're confident of that. I don't just evaporate. I don't just turn into oblivion.
Well, you can. If you displease God, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. God is going to cut you off, and he's going to say, I can't see him anymore. He's going to turn away from you, and then you won't be able to reunite. Salvation will be impossible for you, because salvation means that God has got to pull you back into himself.
Right.
Okay, but God doesn't want to see you anymore. He doesn't even know you exist. He knows your physical body is there, but he's not interested anymore because you hate him, you deny his existence, you offend him, so he's not going to look at you, right? So now what happens? Well, okay, you're dead. You still want to live. There's something in you that still desperately wants to live, so it's still going to be there. What happens now? Well, you try to create your own world for yourself, but if you're a bad person or you're an evil person, what kind of world is that going to be? It's going to be an evil world, and that's what we call hell.
So we've gotten through death, judgment, heaven and hell, free will, and God. Are angels and demons real?
Yes.
God is real, angels are real, demons are real. Is the devil real?
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, it has to be. You know, we were talking about Michael Knowles being surrounded by the medium, and, you know, you've got a boundary. Well, God has a boundary, too. He's got a very tight boundary. He's perfect. He can't take anything resembling imperfection, right? He can't take it into himself, because that would be a contradiction. Okay? So God needs an antithesis in order to be properly defined. What is that antithesis? Anti-God, or Satan. So it definitely exists. Now, Satan isn't coherent, because, he basically hates existence. Nevertheless, he gains coherence through human beings, through secondary tellers, as they're called in the CTMU. In other words, Satan can nucleate power structures, for example, things like corporations and governments, where you've got people in there that can be acquired as resources, and there's a kind of skeleton, a corporate organization, a governmental, organization that's holding them together, holding them in place, that can be exploited